In the heart of the great city, where the towering skyscrapers kissed the clouds and the streets were always alive with people, a figure sat alone on the wet pavement. The city was a mix of old and new, bright, shining buildings standing beside older, more humble shops. The sound of traffic, the hum of machines, and the chatter of busy people filled the air. But in the midst of it all, a woman with blue skin and silver-white hair sat, almost invisible to the world around her. She was different, and that difference had made her an outcast, an alien in a world of humans struggling to survive in a society that saw her people as nothing more than pests. She was part of a race that had come to Earth in peace, looking for refuge after their home planet was destroyed. But instead of finding a warm welcome, they were met with distrust, fear, and hatred. The blue-skinned woman, who had once been full of life, was now nothing more than a beggar. She sat with a worn-out cloak draped over her thin shoulders, her arms wrapped around her knees as she looked at the people walking by. In her outstretched hand, she held a small tin cup, hoping for any small coin that would help her get by. But most people avoided her. Some threw a quick glance her way before quickly looking away, as if she didn't exist. Others gave her a cold stare, a look full of disgust, before walking past without a word. She was used to it. She had grown up hearing stories of how Earth had once been a beacon of hope, a shining example of kindness and progress. But that was before her people had arrived. Now her race was hated, feared, and rejected. No one wanted to see them. No one wanted to help them. And so, she found herself on the streets of this great city, forgotten by most and ignored by others. The blue-skinned woman was not alone in her suffering. There were others like her, alien refugees, living in poverty and fear. They lived in hidden corners of the city, always looking over their shoulders, always afraid of being caught and sent away. They had no rights, no voice, no future. As the rain began to fall, the woman tightened her cloak around herself, trying to shield her skin from the cold, biting drops. She shivered, her body weak from hunger and exhaustion. She had not eaten in days, and her stomach ached with emptiness. She tried to ignore the ache, focusing instead on the sound of the people rushing by. She had learned to block out the harsh words, the cruel glances, and the cruel reality of her life. But it wasn't always easy. Just then, a man walked by. He was tall, his dark hair neatly combed, wearing a well-tailored suit. His shoes clicked on the pavement, and his face held an expression of quiet authority. He was someone important. That much was clear. The woman had seen people like him before, men and women in suits, walking with purpose, their eyes focused ahead as they moved through the busy streets. They didn't stop. They didn't notice. But this man, he paused. For a brief moment, he looked down at her, his gaze lingering. It wasn't the usual cold look of disdain. It was something different, curiosity, maybe even compassion. His eyes met hers for a moment, and she felt a strange shiver run through her. It wasn't much, just a glance, but it was more than she had received in a long time. The man didn't say anything, but he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small coin. Without a word, he dropped it into her tin cup. Then, just as quickly as he had stopped, he continued on his way, disappearing into the crowd. The woman stared at the coin in her cup. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy her a simple meal. For the first time in days, she felt a small spark of hope. She hadn't expected much, but that small act of kindness meant more than she could express. Maybe, just maybe, there were humans who didn't see her as just an alien beggar. Maybe there was hope for a future where she wasn't just a forgotten face on the street. But as the rain continued to pour, the woman knew that one small act of kindness wouldn't change her life overnight. The world was not kind to her kind. The man who had given her the coin probably didn't even see her as a person, just a pitying figure in need of a few coins. That was how it always went. But still, she couldn't help but wonder, what if there was more to him than the others? What if he could be different? She shook her head, brushing away the thought. She had to survive, and surviving meant keeping her hopes low. Dreams of a better life would only lead to disappointment. Yet, as she sat in the rain, looking at the coin in her cup, she couldn't shake the feeling that this day, this small encounter, could be the start of something different. The world had always felt like it was against her, but maybe, just maybe, there was someone who could change that. The following day, the alien woman returned to her usual spot on the street, hoping for a bit of kindness to survive. The streets of the city were always busy, people rushing from one place to another, their faces unreadable. To them, she was just another beggar, another face in the crowd. But to her, each passing moment was a fight to stay alive, to hold on to whatever hope she could grasp. The city had its own rhythm, a heartbeat made up of cars honking, footsteps echoing, and the constant hum of machinery. But today, something felt different. As the woman sat in her usual place, her cup in front of her, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. It was then that she saw him again, the man from yesterday. He was walking down the street, moving quickly, his sharp suit a contrast against the busy city background. He didn't seem to notice her at first, his eyes focused ahead, as they had been before. But then, as if by instinct, he slowed his pace, his gaze drifted down to her, and their eyes met once more. This time, he didn't look away immediately. The woman felt a strange flutter in her chest. It was the same man, but today, something was different. He wasn't just walking past. He stopped, just a few steps away from her. The sounds of the city seemed to fade for a moment, and all she could hear was the rhythm of her own heartbeat. He looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. The alien woman couldn't hide the confusion in her eyes. Why was he stopping? Why was he looking at her like this? The man reached into his pocket again. He pulled out a small piece of paper, something that looked like a business card, and handed it to her. She hesitated, unsure of what to do. "Here," he said, his voice calm and even. "I can help you. I know someone who might be able to get you out of this situation." She stared at the card, then at him. For a moment, her mind raced. Could this really be happening? Was this man actually offering her a way out, a chance for something better? Or was this just another empty gesture, something meant to make him feel better without changing anything? The woman took the card from his hand, still unsure. The man gave her a small, reassuring smile before turning and walking away. He didn't look back, but she couldn't take her eyes off the card in her hand. It was a simple piece of paper with just a name and a phone number written on it. The letters were neatly written, and the number was a local one. She sat there for a long moment, staring at the card. The rain had stopped, and the hustle of the street continued as if nothing had changed. But to her, everything had changed. This man, this stranger, had given her a glimpse of something she hadn't dared to dream about in years. A way out. For the next few days, the alien woman couldn't stop thinking about the card. Who was this man? What did he mean by "I can help you"? Was he just offering empty promises, or was there a real opportunity hidden behind his words? She knew she couldn't stay on the streets forever. The days were growing colder, and the nights were getting longer. Her body was weaker from hunger, and the constant fear of being caught or mistreated had started to wear her down. The more she thought about it, the more she realized she had nothing left to lose. What could she do? Stay here, begging for scraps? Or take a chance on the possibility of something better? On the 5th day, she made her decision. She found a small, quiet cafe near the address written on the card. The place was warm, and the smell of coffee and pastries filled the air. She sat in the corner, nervously clutching the card in her hand, waiting. Her heart pounded in her chest. What if this was all a mistake? What if this man was playing some kind of cruel trick on her? But then she saw him. The man who had given her the card walked in, his suit as sharp as ever, his face serious. He spotted her right away and gave her a small nod as he walked over. "Glad you came," he said, his voice calm and friendly. "I wasn't sure if you would." She looked at him, still unsure of what to say. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. "What do you want in return?" The man smiled, but this time it wasn't a cold smile. It was warm, genuine. "I don't want anything from you," he said. "I just believe that people like you deserve better, and I think I can help you get there." The woman didn't know what to think. She had been let down so many times before, had been used and ignored by others. But this time, something was different. His words didn't feel empty. There was a sincerity in his eyes that made her want to believe him. "Come with me," he said, "and I'll show you a world where you're not invisible. A world where you're not alone." The alien woman sat back in her chair, her heart racing. For the first time in a long time, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The kind of hope that made her believe that maybe, just maybe, her life could change. She stood up, the decision clear in her mind. She was going to trust him. She was going to take a chance. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. The next day, the alien woman followed the man through the crowded streets of the city. She was unsure what to expect. Her heart pounded in her chest as they walked together, his steps steady, hers hesitant. They didn't talk much as they made their way toward the outskirts of the city, where the tall buildings began to fade into more open spaces. The man led her down quiet streets, away from the busy chaos of the city. She looked around, trying to take in everything. The further they went, the less crowded it became. The air felt different here, fresher, calmer. It was a place she had never been before, a place that seemed so far from the harsh life she had known. They finally arrived at a building that looked very different from the towering skyscrapers in the city. It was smaller, more modest, with tall windows and a welcoming door. There was a sign out front that read, "Hope Foundation." The woman stared at it for a moment, trying to understand what it meant. "This is where you'll be safe," the man said, as he opened the door for her. "You'll be able to rest here, and I'll make sure you get the help you need." She stepped inside, feeling the mixture of curiosity and uncertainty. The inside of the building was warm and inviting. There were chairs arranged in a circle and soft lights hanging from the ceiling. It looked nothing like the cold streets she had lived on. People were sitting in the chairs, talking to each other in quiet voices. Some of them looked tired. Others seemed nervous, but all of them had a kind look in their eyes. The man led her to a seat in the circle and asked her to wait. "I'll be right back," he said with a reassuring smile before walking away. The woman sat quietly, taking in her new surroundings. She felt out of place here, unsure if she truly belonged. For so long, she had been nothing more than a beggar on the streets, barely noticed by anyone. But now, here she was, in a place that seemed to offer something more. Was this real? Or was it just another dream, something that would vanish when she woke up? A woman sitting next to her noticed her uncertainty. She smiled warmly and leaned over. "Don't worry," she said softly. "We've all been where you are. This is a safe place. No one is going to turn you away." The woman looked at her, surprised by the kindness in her voice. "But I'm different," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not like them. I'm not human." The woman beside her shook her head. "That doesn't matter here. We take care of each other, no matter where you come from. You're safe now." The alien woman nodded slowly, feeling a small sense of comfort. She had never been around people who didn't look at her with fear or disgust. It was strange, but it felt good. After a while, the man returned. He wasn't alone this time. A tall woman with short brown hair followed him into the room. She had a warm smile on her face and a kind look in her eyes. "This is Dr. Avery," the man said. "She's here to help you." The woman nodded at the alien woman, her expression calm and friendly. "I understand you've been through a lot," Dr. Avery said gently. "But here, we will help you get back on your feet. You don't have to be alone anymore." The alien woman didn't know what to say. She had never been offered help like this before. She had never been shown such kindness by anyone. I don't know what to do," she admitted. "I've never been anywhere like this. I don't know how to start over." Dr. Avery smiled again. That's okay. We'll help you take it one step at a time. First, let's make sure you have everything you need. Rest, food, and a safe place to sleep. And when you're ready, we can help you find a way to live a life you deserve. The woman blinked, trying to understand what Dr. Avery was saying. It felt almost too good to be true. But at that moment, she realized something. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about survival. She wasn't thinking about begging for food or hiding from fear. She was thinking about a future where she wasn't alone, a future where she could be something more than a beggar. I don't know how to thank you," the alien woman said, her voice shaking with emotion. "You've given me more than I could ever ask for." The man who had brought her here nodded. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You don't need to do anything. We're just doing what's right." The alien woman felt a lump form in her throat. She wanted to say more, to express the gratitude that was overflowing in her heart, but the words didn't come. Instead, she simply nodded, feeling the weight lift from her shoulders. Over the next few days, the woman stayed at the Hope Foundation. She was given a bed, food, and a sense of security she had never known before. She learned that there were many others here, people from all walks of life, all seeking refuge and a fresh start. The foundation was a place of healing, a place where anyone could find the support they needed to rebuild their life. And though it was still hard for her to believe, the woman began to trust the people around her. She began to see that perhaps there was hope for her after all, a hope that didn't come from running or hiding. It came from standing tall, from accepting help, and from realizing that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as invisible as she had once believed. Days turned into weeks, and the alien woman began to feel more at home at the Hope Foundation. The uncertainty she had felt when she first arrived was slowly fading away. She had a bed to sleep in, food to eat, and the warmth of others who had been through struggles of their own. No longer was she alone. But even though she was beginning to feel more comfortable, there was still something missing. She had spent so many years just surviving, focusing on the next meal or finding shelter. Now, in this place of safety, she felt something new, a sense of purpose. She didn't want to just stay hidden away, protected by the kindness of others. She wanted to do something, to contribute, to be more than just someone who had been helped. It was one afternoon, as she was sitting in the common room, that the man who had brought her to the foundation approached her again. He smiled as he sat down beside her, his eyes kind, but there was a seriousness in his voice. "How are you settling in?" he asked. She nodded, her eyes looking around the room. It's different, but it's good. I've never had a place like this before." He smiled, sensing the shift in her. "I can tell. You've come a long way. But I think there's more you can do. There's a position opening up here, a way for you to help others. Would you be interested?" She looked at him, her heart skipping a beat. "A position? You mean you want me to work here?" He nodded. "Yes. You've been through a lot, and you understand pain and loss better than most. You can help others who come here, people who are just starting their journey. You know what it's like to feel lost, to feel like you have no one. You can make a real difference." She thought for a moment, her mind racing. The idea of helping others was something she hadn't considered before. She had been so focused on her own survival that the thought of giving back seemed like a distant dream. But now, after everything she had been through, the idea of making a difference felt right. "I'd like that," she said quietly, her voice filled with determination. "I want to help." The man smiled, clearly pleased. "Good. We'll start small. There are people here who could really use someone like you. I'll introduce you to them." Over the next few days, the woman began her new role at the Hope Foundation. She started by talking to the newcomers, sharing her story with them. It wasn't easy at first. She was still learning to trust herself, to believe that she had something to offer. But as she spoke with others, people who had been through pain, loss, and fear, she realized how much her own experience could help them. She wasn't alone in her struggles. Others had faced similar hardships, and together, they could begin to heal. She started to feel like she belonged here, not just as a person who was being helped, but as someone who could help others in return. One of the newcomers, a young man from a faraway land, came to her one afternoon, his eyes filled with sadness. He had been through war and had lost everything. He had no family, no home. He didn't know how to start over, how to find hope again. The woman sat with him, listening carefully to his story. She could feel the weight of his pain, the same kind of loneliness she had felt not too long ago. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing. She wasn't going to let him give up. "You're not alone here," she told him softly. "We're all starting over together. It's not going to be easy, but you can do it. We'll help each other." The young man looked at her, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "How can I start? I don't even know where to begin." The woman smiled gently. "Start by believing that you deserve a new beginning. And then, take it one step at a time. Every day, do one thing to move forward. It doesn't matter how small. The important thing is that you keep moving." As she spoke, she realized that she wasn't just giving him advice. She was reminding herself of the truth she had only recently discovered. She had the power to change her own future, to build something better, one small step at a time. After the conversation, the young man seemed calmer, more hopeful. He thanked her and left, a small spark of hope in his eyes. The woman watched him go, feeling a sense of accomplishment. She had helped him, and in doing so, she had helped herself. Days passed, and with each one, the alien woman grew more confident in her new role. She began to take on more responsibilities at the Foundation, organizing group meetings, offering guidance, and supporting those who were struggling. People started to look up to her, not just as a survivor, but as someone who had the strength and wisdom to lead others. She had come so far from the desperate beggar she had once been. She had found a new purpose, a reason to keep moving forward. The life she had once known, one of pain, fear, and loneliness, felt like a distant memory. Now she was helping others find their way, just as she had been helped when she needed it most. But even as she embraced her new role, there was still something tugging at her heart. She knew that she hadn't yet found the full path of her future. There was still more to discover, more to become. But for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of peace. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. And that was enough. As the weeks passed, the alien woman's role at the Hope Foundation grew stronger. She had found a place where she could be useful, where her experiences were valued. Every day, she woke up with a new sense of purpose. Helping others had become a part of who she was, something she had never thought possible in her old life. Yet, even as she embraced this new role, challenges still lay ahead. The peaceful life she had started to build felt fragile at times. The woman knew that the journey wasn't over. It never truly was. One evening, after finishing her shift helping the newcomers, she sat in the quiet corner of the building, looking out the window at the stars. The world outside seemed so far away, yet so close. She had always wondered about the universe, the life beyond Earth. But now, in her new life, the stars were less about wonder and more about hope. The stars symbolized a future she could reach for, a future where she was no longer lost. But that night, something was different. She could sense it in the air, an unease she couldn't explain. The doors of the foundation opened with a loud creak, and a man walked in. He was dressed in plain clothes, but his face was tense. He walked straight to the main office, where the head of the foundation was waiting. The woman could see the tension in their body language from where she sat. Curious, she decided to approach. She stood up and quietly walked toward the office, her heart beating faster. She had become accustomed to a peaceful routine of the foundation, and any disruption felt strange. As she reached the office, she overheard parts of the conversation. The man who had entered was talking about an incident in the city. There had been a violent protest in the streets. Tensions between humans and aliens had grown once again. And now, there were reports of attacks. The foundation, once a symbol of safety, was no longer the quiet refuge it had been before. The alien woman felt her stomach twist with anxiety. She knew how easily fear could grow. She had seen it in her own life, the fear that led to violence and mistrust. Now, it seemed like that fear was creeping closer to the place she had found safety. The man was speaking again, his voice filled with urgency. If things continue like this, we may have to close the foundation. The city is getting more dangerous. The public doesn't trust us. We might be in danger. The woman's heart sank. Closing the foundation, that would be a disaster. So many people relied on this place for hope and support. She couldn't imagine the foundation being shut down, especially when it had become her home. She turned and walked back to her room, feeling unsettled. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thoughts swirling in her mind. She had been through so much, and this new life, this new chance at a future, was all at risk. She wasn't ready to give up. The next morning, she decided to take action. She didn't know what she could do, but she couldn't just sit back and wait. She had learned to fight for what mattered, to stand up for herself, and now she had to stand up for others. She found the man who had brought her to the foundation. He was in the common room, speaking with a few of the staff members. As soon as he saw her approach, he smiled, but his smile quickly faded when he saw the seriousness in her eyes. "We need to talk," she said quietly. He nodded, gesturing for her to sit. "What's on your mind?" She sat down, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "I overheard the conversation last night. About the protest, about the attacks. You said the foundation might be in danger. I can't let that happen." He raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean? You're one of the volunteers here. You've done more than enough." She shook her head. "It's not enough. People need this place. They need safety. They need hope. If we close the doors, where will they go? What will happen to them?" The man was quiet for a moment, and then he sighed. "I understand, but what can we do? There's not much we can control in times like these. The public is angry. We're being blamed for things that we didn't do." The woman leaned forward. "Then we fight back. We show the people that we're not the enemy. We prove that the foundation is a place of peace. We need to stand together, now more than ever. We can't let fear destroy what we've built." The man looked at her, surprised by her determination. "You're willing to risk everything. What if it gets worse? What if the attacks come here?" "I've risked everything before," she replied, her voice steady. "And I've seen what happens when you let fear control you. I won't let that happen again." He stared at her for a long moment, as if weighing her words. Finally, he nodded. "All right. We'll do everything we can to keep the foundation open. But it won't be easy." The alien woman stood up, her heart filled with purpose. "We can't give up. Not now." As she walked away, she could feel the weight of the situation, but also the strength of her resolve. She knew the road ahead would be difficult. The world outside was changing, and not all of it was for the better. But she had found a place of hope, and she wasn't going to let it be taken away. No matter what happened, she was ready to fight for the future. The days following the conversation with the man were filled with tension. The alien woman couldn't shake the fear that had settled in her heart. The city was on edge, and every passing day brought new reports of protests, violence, and growing hatred toward aliens. The Hope Foundation was at the center of it all, a beacon of safety for those who had nowhere else to go. But now, it seemed that beacon might be snuffed out. The foundation had always been a sanctuary, but with the rising anger in the streets, it was becoming clear that nothing was safe. Fear was everywhere. People no longer saw each other as neighbors. They saw strangers, enemies. The woman spent hours in quiet thought, sitting alone in the common room or walking along the foundation's grounds. She couldn't ignore the heavy feeling in the air. Everyone was afraid. Staff, volunteers, and the people who had come for help. But more than anything, she could feel the fear inside herself. the fear of losing it all. But something inside her refused to let that fear control her. She had been through too much to just give up. She had fought for her survival, and now she would fight for others. One morning, the man who had been guiding her through her journey came to her with a plan. He knew things were getting worse, and he needed her help more than ever. He was organizing a rally, a peaceful gathering to show the city that the Foundation was a place of safety, not a threat. The goal was simple: to stand together, to prove that peace was stronger than fear. The woman wasn't sure at first. A rally? Would that really make a difference? Would it change anything? But as she listened to the man's words, she felt something stir inside her. The Foundation had always been a place for new beginnings. It had given her a second chance, and now it was time to give others the same opportunity. "I'll help," she said quietly. "I'll be there." Over the next few days, the Foundation worked tirelessly to prepare for the rally. Volunteers worked together, making posters, gathering supplies, and organizing everything. The alien woman helped with whatever she could. She spoke to the newcomers, reassuring them that they had a part to play in this, that their voices mattered. The day of the rally arrived, and the streets of the city were filled with people. The alien woman stood near the front, surrounded by other members of the Foundation. She felt the weight of the moment, the uncertainty of what was to come. Would the rally work? Would people listen? The air was thick with tension as they gathered in the central square. There were humans and aliens standing side by side. Some faces were filled with hope, while others were filled with fear. The alien woman could see the nervousness in their eyes, but she also saw something else: determination. They had come together, united by a common purpose. They were ready to stand up for what they believed in. The man who had brought her to the Foundation stepped up to the podium. He addressed the crowd, his voice calm but strong. "We are not enemies. We are neighbors, people, citizens of this world. We all deserve a chance to live, to thrive, to be accepted. We are here today to show that peace is possible, and that the Hope Foundation is a place where all are welcome. No matter your race, your background, your history, we are all humans." The woman stood still, watching as the crowd listened intently to the man's words. The energy in the air was palpable. She could see people nodding, some even starting to clap. It wasn't much, but it was a sign, just a small sign, that things could change. But then, out of nowhere, a group of protesters appeared on the edge of the square. They were shouting, waving signs filled with hate and anger. The woman's heart raced. She could see the tension rising, hear the shouting growing louder. It was clear that this rally wasn't going to be peaceful for long. The protesters pushed closer, some even throwing things at the crowd. The woman felt a surge of panic, but she couldn't let it show. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when the Foundation's message had to be heard louder than the fear and hate in the streets. Without thinking, she stepped forward. "Stop," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We are not your enemies. We are all just people trying to survive in this world. We want peace, not violence." Her words rang out, and for a moment, the shouting stopped. All eyes turned to her. She could feel the weight of their gaze, the uncertainty in their hearts. But in that moment, she knew she had to keep speaking. She couldn't back down now. "We have all suffered," she continued, her voice steady. "We've all been through pain, fear, and loss. But we can choose a different path. We can choose kindness. We can choose to live together, not apart." The protesters hesitated, some looking confused, others uncertain. Slowly, one of them dropped their sign, their anger fading into quiet contemplation. Then, another followed. The rally's energy shifted, from fear to hope, from anger to understanding. The man from the Foundation stepped forward, joining the woman. "This is the future we want to build," he said. "Not a world of hate, but a world of unity." The protesters began to leave, one by one. The tension in the air started to fade, and for the first time in a long while, the woman felt a spark of hope. The rally had worked. It had made a difference. As the crowd began to disperse, the woman looked around at the people who had come together for peace. She felt proud, knowing that they had made a stand for the future they all deserved. The battle wasn't over, but it was a victory, a small one, and it was a start. The days following the rally felt like a turning point for the city. The violence and protests didn't stop overnight, but something had shifted. People were talking. They were listening. The rally had been a spark, a small flame in a dark world, but now it was spreading, one person at a time. For the alien woman, life at the Hope Foundation returned to a new kind of normal. She had helped save the foundation from the brink of collapse. But she knew the fight wasn't over. There were still many challenges ahead. The city was divided, and the road to peace was long. But the rally had given her hope, and for the first time, she felt like she was part of something bigger than herself. The foundation remained open, its doors still offering safety to those who needed it. Volunteers worked tirelessly, helping newcomers, giving them food, shelter, and the promise of a better future. The alien woman continued her work, but now her role felt more important than ever. She wasn't just a helper anymore. She was a symbol of what was possible. Her own journey, from an alien beggar to a leader in the foundation, was a story that others needed to hear. She had found a new purpose. One afternoon, as she was speaking with a new family that had just arrived at the foundation, the man from the rally approached her. He smiled when he saw her, a look of pride on his face. "You did it," he said softly, his voice filled with admiration. She looked at him, confused. "Did what?" "The rally. You helped change everything. People are talking. They're starting to understand. We're not just aliens or humans. We're all people, and we all deserve to be treated with respect." She smiled, but the weight of the world still lingered on her shoulders. "There's still so much to do. We can't just stop here." He nodded. "I know, but you've already made a difference. You've shown them what's possible. And that's more than most people ever do." The alien woman thought about his words as she watched the new family settle into their room. She had come so far, and yet there was still a long road ahead. There were still people who saw her as different, who saw her as an outsider. The world wasn't suddenly perfect because of a rally. The foundation had survived for now, but she knew that peace would require more than just one act of courage. It would take time, effort, and determination. But for the first time in a long time, she believed that it could happen. The world could change, and she would be part of that change. A few weeks later, things started to settle down in the city. The protests had lessened, and while tensions still existed, the atmosphere felt different. There was a quiet understanding that had begun to spread, one conversation at a time. People who had once been enemies were starting to see each other as equals. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The alien woman continued to speak at community gatherings, sharing her story of survival, of loss, and of hope. She talked about her journey from a beggar to a leader, about how she had found a home in the most unlikely of places. Her words resonated with people, human and alien alike. They saw in her a reflection of their own struggles, their own dreams. One evening, after another successful speech at a local gathering, the woman was walking back to the foundation when she saw a group of children playing in the park. She paused and watched them for a moment. They were laughing and running, their innocence untouched by the fear that had once gripped the world. She realized then that this was why she had fought so hard. For the future, the children played without worry, their smiles a reminder of what the world could be. She walked over to them, and they looked up at her with wide eyes. One of the little girls smiled shyly and approached her. "Are you one of the helpers of the foundation?" the girl asked. The alien woman knelt down to the child's level and smiled. "Yes, I am. Do you want to help too?" The little girl nodded eagerly. "I want to help make the world better, like you." The alien woman's heart swelled. It was moments like these that reminded her why she had done it all. For the children, for the next generation. She wanted them to grow up in a world where peace was possible, where fear didn't control people's hearts. It was a world she was helping to build, brick by brick, hand by hand. The woman stood up and watched the children play again, her thoughts quiet but filled with determination. She had come so far. And while the future wasn't certain, she knew that with every step, every word, every act of kindness, they were all moving closer to the world they deserved. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange, the woman felt at peace. The journey wasn't over, and the world wasn't perfect, but it was better, and that was enough for now. She had found her place in this new world, and no matter what came next, she was ready for it.